Short answer, as most common men of his time, by foot. So, dear viewer, I am certain that you expected me to say by ship. This might be partly true for Apostle Paul's long voyages, but most of his travels would be on foot along the excellent Roman road network. Also he, as others, would travel in groups to reduce the risk of bandits. That being said, Apostle Paul did also voyage far for the good word of our Lord on ships. This he did for his 3 missionary voyages to Asia Minor and Greece, and for his 4th voyage to Rome. In both voyaging on foot and by ship, the Apostle Paul took advantage of the great connectivity that had been established by the Romans, roads on land and great merchant ships like the Corbita grain ships at sea. Generally speaking, when one wanted to travel far, it was possible to book passage on the merchant ships of the Roman Empire. There were no ferries or real public transport, so the merchant ships were the only real option. One could pay to be allowed passage on board, but a passenger like Apostle Paul would have had to bring his own food supplies. And he and his companions would need to sleep on the deck out of the way of the crew. It would not be a leisure trip. Being that the apostle was a tent maker by vocation, would most likely have been a boon for his companions, as he would have been able to provide some cover from the elements. Apostle Paul would, as stated, make 3 missionary journeys, which would include sea voyages and the 4th voyage to Rome to appeal to Caesar. To travel by sea during antiquity was by no means without its dangers, as was travel in general, as Apostle Paul recounts in 2 Corinthians 11:25-27. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I passed a night and a day on the deep, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own race, dangers from gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, in toil, in hardship, through many sleepless nights, through the hunger and thirst, through frequent fasting, through cold and exposure. Clearly, traveling was no leisure, and Apostle Paul did not try to hide it, and he would be shipwrecked again en route to Rome on Malta. It is safe to assume that the same hardships would meet other travelers in antiquity. So, Apostle Paul is not just a witness to our Lord Jesus Christ, but also to traveling at sea in antiquity. And then we should even remember that the Roman Empire had made it more secure. Especially the threat of pirates at sea had been reduced significantly, making voyaging with commercial ships safer, which meant that merchant shipping increased significantly across the Mediterranean. And with this, the voyaging of commoners like Apostle Paul and the other apostles, who would reach and preach to the far corners of the Roman world, a possibility which they took advantage of. Thus, on the merchant ships of the empire that crucified the Lord, his word would be spread to all the peoples. For Apostle Paul, his first missionary journey was with the Apostle Barnabas and lasted 2 years from AD 46 to 47. It went from Antioch in Syria to the island of Cyprus, then to Pamphylia and Galatia in present-day Turkey, back to the coast and by ship home to Antioch, at least 3 voyages by ship. The second missionary journey of Apostle Paul would be his longest and primary. It would start from Jerusalem in about 51 AD and last about 3 years. This journey set out on foot up the Levant through present-day Turkey, revisiting many sites from the first journey before sailing to Greece. He would visit Athens, but the main stay would be in Corinth for 18 months, which led to his close affiliation with the Church of Corinth, as is shown in the Corinthian letters. He would leave Corinth by sea across to Ephesus, from where he would sail back to Caesarea in Judea and walk to Jerusalem. His third journey would commence in AD 54 and last 4 years. He would walk from Antioch, revisiting congregations from his first 2 journeys. He would sail the Aegean Sea and stay 3 years in Ephesus before returning by ship to Judea and Jerusalem. He would be arrested in Jerusalem in AD 58 and held for 2 years before being sent to Rome in AD 60. As a citizen of Rome proper, Apostle Paul had the right to appeal to Caesar. Thus began his fourth journey with the longest sea voyage. It was a long and arduous journey, including a shipwreck leading to Apostle Paul being stranded on Malta for 3 months. Eventually he did arrive in Rome in 61 AD. This short summary is to show how a commoner could travel by both land and sea in the Roman Empire. Apostle Paul was not an explorer, merchant, or sailor. He was an apostle, making use of the same possibilities for travel that were open to other commoners at the time. The other apostles likewise made use of the possibilities for booking passage on merchant ships to spread the word of Christ. Apostle Paul's journeys are well described in the Acts of the Apostles, making them very accessible. It shows how the great interconnectivity created by Hellenism and the Roman Empire opened up the Mediterranean world for the spread of the gospel. Rome imported Christianity on the very ships that fed her.